Hello and welcome to this hurricane season short summary. This one is going to be looking at the 2004 Atlantic hurricane season. Quite the notable one. With a total of 15 tropical storms, 9 hurricanes, and 6 major hurricanes, this is well above average for the Atlantic, and this is absolutely shown off here by its accumulated cyclone energy, ACE for short. This ACE reached a total of 226.88. Very, very impressive. We see in our timeline down here that both August and September are pretty damn active. That is very, it's not atypical for many storms to form in August, but it is definitely much more than you would normally see. And also in September as well, I might add. In total, all storms combined caused 3,261 deaths, as well as 61.1 billion US dollars in damage. Starting with Hurricane Charley as our first notable hurricane of the season, TD3 develops on August 9th and does so to the south-southeast of Barbados. Charley would become a hurricane just 2 days later, and then landfall on August 12th, late on August 12th, on Alquizar. I apologize if I pronounced that wrong. And it did so with wind speeds of 120 miles per hour. Charley would undergo pretty rapid intensification just before landfall on Florida and peaked August 13th with winds of 150 miles per hour, a very strong Category 4 wind speed, and at a pressure of 941 millibars. Charley would take, as you can see here at this GIF down at the bottom right middle, a relatively sharpish turn towards Port Charlotte and Punta Gorda. I say semi-unpredicted because quite a few local meteorologists went off script and predicted a turn towards these two towns, which would end up being correct. This would not stop residents from still being pretty surprised at the intensity of Charley upon landfall, though. Charley caused a total of 15 direct and 20 non-direct deaths, as well as $16.9 billion in damage, a truly staggering amount. Hurricane Frances would start off as TD5, I believe, and would become a tropical storm on just August 25th, and then a hurricane on just the very next day. Frances would then proceed to achieve its first peak, undergoing very rapid intensification all the way to Category 4 for a brief time, peak winds of 135 miles per hour, and it did so on August 28th. The eyewall replacement cycle weakened the storm a bit, as the eyewall replacement cycle tends to do, and then Frances moved up in the wind speeds even further to peak at 145 miles per hour and at a pressure of 935 millibars. This peak was reached on September 2nd. Frances would go directly over San Salvador Island as well as Grand Bahama, and then stabilized as a Category 2 with a very wide eye and a slow forward speed at this point in its life. Frances then proceeded to landfall on Hutchinson Island, Florida on September 5th, and in High Springs, Florida, a maximum of 402 millimeters. Oh my goodness, could you imagine 402 inches? 402 millimeters of rain was dropped there, although the normal for Frances was around 200 millimeters, somewhere around there. One of the last things here, Frances would briefly earn the title of having the most amount of tornadoes spawned by a tropical system, causing 106 tornadoes in 6 states across the span of 4 days. Ivan would then very quickly beat this record and it still holds it to this day. But we're not on Ivan. Francis would cause 7 direct and 43 non-direct deaths for a total of 50, and cause a still pretty damn staggering $10.1 billion in damage. Ivan is easily the most notable storm of the season, and for very good reason. Ivan started off as TD9 to the southwest of Cape Verde, and then became a tropical storm on September 3rd. Ivan becomes a hurricane by September 5th, and by the same day, at 5 p.m., it is already a Category 4. That is this little tiny orange dot that I am attempting to circle with my own red dot. Laser finder, laser. Thank you, Google Slides. Ivan would achieve its full peak on September 11th. This peak was 165 miles per hour, and this storm actually achieved 910 millibars twice, both when it reached Category 5 intensity. Ivan would then landfall on Gulf Shores, Alabama on September 16th, and did so with winds of 120 miles per hour. And it would stay this way, it would stay as a hurricane, I should say, for a relatively long amount of time inland. We see this one pale yellow dot that is still signifying Category 1 intensity relatively far inland. Ivan then proceeds to loop around the southern 13 colonies. I wrote southern New England here. Please ignore that. This is the around the southern 13 colonies, and then proceeded to go back into the Gulf of Mexico. It would be around here that around 100 or so tornadoes, not 120. 126 is the total from Ivan, but I digress. Around 106-ish tornadoes would happen in Texas and Louisiana as Ivan made landfall there as a tropical depression. Ivan would cause 92 direct and 32 indirect deaths and a whopping $26.1 billion in damage. Hurricane Jeanne is our next to last storm here. Jeanne started off as TD11 and formed very late on September 13th. Jeanne then quickly landfell on Yabucoa, Puerto Rico on September 15th still as a tropical storm, and then quickly transitioned to a hurricane before going back again into a storm. It would be around here that Jeanne absolutely tortured Haiti and in the community of Guillaume-Nives. Apologies if I pronounced that wrong. I probably did by a lot. Again, apologies. 2,800 out of Jeanne's 3,005 deaths were caused in this community alone. Jeanne would, while undergoing a loop, also undergo a slow re-intensification back into a hurricane after crossing around the Dominican Republic on September 20th. Jeanne finally became a major hurricane and also a pressure of 950 millibars by September 25th, and then landfell on Hutchinson Island the next day. So, quite a rapid moving storm from here on out. Jeanne would then follow Francis pretty damn closely within around 6 miles, with its specifically like center track, so where the eye is, until a northward turn in around Pasco County, Florida. Jeanne caused a total of 3,027 deaths, 3,005 occurred in Haiti, and just under $8 billion in damage. Notable just for how late the storm forms, Otto forms, again, very late in late November through a interaction between a cold front and a strong low-pressure trough. Low-pressure trough, same thing. And these interacted and caused a subtropical system to develop on November 29th. Otto would then achieve its peak on late November 29th, not going any stronger, at a whopping 50 miles per hour. How intense. Otto is then strangely reclassified into a tropical storm and then gets its name as Otto on the 30th. Now, despite pretty cold sea temperatures for the time, we're not seeing very rapid weakening with Otto, which is pretty impressive. Usually, even if you have no shear, cold sea temperatures are going to kill this thing off, as hurricanes kind of act as like giant heat sinks, taking all the moist and warm air that comes from the ocean, as the ocean is pure moisture, just with a little bit of salt added. And just again, we don't see this rapid weakening of Otto. Otto completes a loop and starts it on the same day, that being December 1st. Otto becomes a depression on the 2nd and reaches its peak pressure of 995 millibars. And then Otto finally dissipates just short of 1,500 kilometers to the southeast of Bermuda on December 3rd. The biggest note here is that Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean are all going to get their own separate videos from me, so stay tuned for those in the coming, I'll just say weeks, because I don't know when I'll upload them or have time to even record them and edit them in the first place. This season as a whole was caused by a rare Modoki El Nino. El Ninos typically cause unfavorable conditions in the Atlantic, while causing favorable in the Central and East Pacific. This was reversed with this El Nino. Unfavorable conditions were in the Pacific, favorable conditions were in the Atlantic. We also saw one of the latest dates for tropical storm formation, that being Alex in very late July. Speaking of Alex, Alex is also the strongest storm north of 38 degrees latitude. And speaking of latitudes, Ivan was the southernmost hurricane and major hurricane, as well as Category 4 hurricane, at around 10 degrees north. In fact, it was the first major hurricane to form at around that latitude. Florida would see 6 separate instances of hurricane force winds and 5 storms landfalling on Florida directly. The 6th being Ivan seeing those hurricane force winds with the Panhandle, the inland Panhandle, not the peninsula. Note that this season is tied for second place with the number of major hurricanes, that being 6, with a number of seasons. Also, Ivan currently has the second highest individual ace in the Atlantic of all time as of right now, that ace being 70.4. And speaking of ace, this season has the 6th highest ace at the time of recording, and seasonal, again, with that being 226.88. Again, we also at the very beginning saw just how many storms formed in August. In fact, we saw 8, and Jean is actually the 4th deadliest 21st century tropical storm, at least for the Atlantic, if I'm not mistaken, though I think that is worldwide. Also note that the notables that are getting their own videos, Charlie, Francis, Ivan, and Jean, also all had their names retired, with obviously replacements coming in for what would actually be the 2010 name list, since the name lists just rotate. That, folks, is all that I have for the 2004 hurricane season in the Atlantic. I hope that you all learned something from this video and also enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you all so much for watching.